Joan found out on a Tuesday. Not from Curtis. Not from a conversation. Not from a confession. Not from any of the ways you imagine it happening when you have been quietly dreading it for months. She found out from a screenshot. 7 words typed by the man she had loved for 3 years, sent to his friend Damon like she was a complaint being filed and not a person being discussed. She couldn't take a hint. I tried. Joan was sitting in the parking lot of a gym she had never chosen, paying for a membership she had never wanted on a schedule that was not hers. All of it. Every single piece of it, because Curtis Daniels had left a gym bag on her kitchen counter with a post-it note that said Monday. No excuses, and she had picked it up, because she thought that was how you saved something. She did not know yet that you cannot save something that has already been sold. She put her phone down. She got out of the car. She walked into that gym and picked up the heaviest weight she had ever lifted in her life. And the man watching her from across the room, the one nobody in this building spoke about above a whisper, the one who owned this gym and this block and several other things people did not ask about, because the people who had asked about those things were no longer in a position to ask about anything. That man put down what he was doing and walked over. He didn't say she was beautiful. He didn't say she was brave. He didn't say any of the things people say when they are trying to make you feel better. He said, "Your form is going to cost you your shoulder." And somehow, that was the beginning of everything. And if this is your kind of story, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications, because I drop new stories every week and you do not want to miss what happens next. She had been with Curtis Daniels for 3 years. 3 years of Sunday dinners at his mother's house in Decatur. 3 years of splitting the streaming subscriptions and negotiating who was responsible for the dish soap and finding his charger in her bag and knowing, without being told, that he wanted the window seat on airplanes even though he never looked out. 3 years of believing that what they had was the kind of solid that didn't need to be stated. The gym bag had appeared 2 weeks after his work friend Damon got a girlfriend. A small, narrow woman named Brittany, who wore crop tops in November and laughed at everything Damon said, even when it wasn't funny, and had a before and after post pinned to the top of her social media page that had over 12,000 saves. Curtis had come home from that first dinner quiet. Joan had asked him what was wrong. He had said nothing. Then he started leaving fitness influencer videos playing on his laptop where she could see them. Then came the comments. Soft at first, almost gentle. "You would feel so much better with more energy. Don't you want to be healthier? I am just saying. For your heart. For us." Joan was a size 18. She had been a size 18 since she was 23 years old. She was now 31, a claims processor at an insurance firm in Midtown Atlanta, and her heart, according to her doctor 3 months ago, was perfectly fine. Her blood pressure was good. Her cholesterol was good. Her doctor had shaken her hand at the end of the appointment and said, genuinely, "Whatever you are doing, keep doing it." But she picked up the bag, because the alternative was losing him, and she didn't know yet that she was already lost. The gym was called Apex. It was not the Planet Fitness 2 blocks from her apartment that smelled like rubber and ambition and played the same 4 songs on rotation. It was not the YMCA with the broken water fountain on Peachtree, where the elderly water aerobics class treated the pool like a social club. Curtis had signed her up for Apex specifically, a place she would later learn was not designed for women like her, or in the way that certain rooms are built with dimensions that assume a specific kind of body and call that assumption neutral. The membership fee had made her wince when she saw the charge clear her account. She had not told Curtis that. She had not told Curtis a lot of things lately. She walked in on a Monday morning at 6:47 because she had told herself 6:30 and given herself 17 minutes of grace. The lobby was clean in a way that felt intentional. Not just clean, but curated. The kind of place where the cleanliness itself was a statement about who was expected here and who was merely tolerated. 3 men in dark suits stood near the far wall. Not gym clothes. Suits. At 7 in the morning. They were not working out. They were not waiting for anyone visible. They were simply there, on the way certain objects are placed in rooms to communicate something without saying it. Joan noted them the way her job had trained her to note anomalies, quietly, without reaction, filing the information for later. The woman at the front desk had a face arranged in professional welcome and eyes that did something else entirely. A slow scan, a polite smile that did not reach her eyes or intend to. First time? Yes. Orientation is Wednesdays. You can use the floor in the meantime. Cardio's on the left. She said cardio the way a doctor says diet. Pointed. Prescriptive. Joan smiled back. The same kind of smile. Thank you. She found the treadmills. She got on one. She set it to a walk because running felt like performing, and she was not ready to perform yet. And she kept her eyes straight ahead and told herself she was doing this for herself, even though the post-it note in her kitchen said something different. She lasted 40 minutes. When she got off, her thighs ached in a way that felt honest, and she felt simultaneously accomplished and mortified, and she could not have explained either sensation adequately to anyone who asked. On her way out, she turned the wrong corner looking for the exit and walked into a hallway that was too quiet and too clean. There was a door at the end, propped open, and through the gap came the sound of something being hit. Rhythmic, controlled, the sound of weight connecting with resistance over and over and over again, without pause, without error. The kind of repetition that was not exercise. It was discipline. It was something being maintained. She stopped. The inside the room, a man was working a heavy bag with the kind of focus that made Joan feel, immediately and instinctively, that she had walked in on something private. He wasn't wearing a shirt. He was lean in the way that suggested his body was a tool he maintained rather than a thing he decorated, every movement economic and deliberate. Black hair damp at the temples, tattoos from his left shoulder all the way down to his wrist. Dark ink, dense, deliberate, layered over years in the kind of patterns that told a story to anyone who could read the language and promised consequences to anyone who couldn't. He had not looked up. Joan stepped back toward the hallway. The bag swung. He caught it with both hands, both palms flat against the leather, and held it completely still, not slowing it, not wrestling with it, just stopping it, in the way you stop something that was never going to win against you. And then, without turning around, he said, "You are in the wrong hallway." His voice was low, unhurried, the kind of voice that did not need to raise itself because it was not accustomed to being ignored. The accent was there, but faint, like something he had learned over years to sand down to a manageable edge so that people could concentrate on what he was saying rather than how he was saying it. "I was looking for the exit," Joan said. "Other direction." He let the bag swing back to center. Still hadn't looked at her. Building is mirrored. Easy mistake. Sorry for interrupting. Now he turned. Lim Jae-sung had a face that had been arranged by someone with very specific ideas about symmetry and consequence. Sharp jaw. Dark eyes that were direct in the way that very few people's eyes are genuinely direct, because genuine directness requires not caring what you will find when you look, and this man had clearly decided a long time ago that whatever he found, he would handle it. He looked at Joan, not in the way the front desk woman had looked at her, not as an assessment, not as a comparison, not as a question about why she was there, like she was simply a person who had walked into his space and he was deciding what to do about it. "You are not interrupting," he said. "I was finishing." Joan nodded. She turned to leave. "You will want to take the stairs on the left," he said behind her. "The elevator sticks on the second floor. You will be in there 10 minutes if you are unlucky." She paused. "How do you know I was going to take the elevator?" A beat, and the kind of beat that had texture. "I don't," he said. "Now I am just hoping you weren't." She left. She thought about that hallway for 3 days, not obsessively, more like the way you think about a word you do not recognize, returning to it periodically, aware that you do not yet have the definition, but certain somehow that the definition matters. Curtis called on Tuesday night while Joan was eating leftover jollof rice in front of a television show she was not actually watching. "Did you go?" "Yes, Curtis." "How long?" 40 minutes. Silence, the kind that had weight. 40 minutes is not really a workout, Joan. It was my first day. Brittany does an hour minimum, every day. She told me she has never missed. I am not Brittany. The silence again, longer this time. I know, I am just saying. If you are serious about this, Joan wanted to say. I was serious about us before you bought me a gym bag with a post-it note like I was a problem that needed a solution. She said, I will go longer on Wednesday. Good. A pause, and then softer, with that warmth that came and went like bad signal. I miss you. Come over this weekend. She said yes. She always said yes. It had become a reflex. The path of least resistance down a slope she had not noticed was sloping. She should have paid more attention to what she was saying yes to. She went back Wednesday, and Thursday, and Friday. By the second week, she had mapped the gym the way you map any unfamiliar territory. Exits, blind spots, the machines that faced walls instead of mirrors, the people who looked through you and the people who didn't look at you at all, which was different and somehow preferable. She noticed other things too. The men in suits who rotated on a schedule she couldn't quite pin down. The way certain conversations stopped when a door opened at the wrong end of the hallway. The fact that the manager, a polished man named Mr. Ellis, who wore a headset and spoke to everyone with the same practiced warmth, visibly changed posture when a particular black car appeared in the parking lot. Shoulders back, chin up. The posture of someone who had learned, at some cost, to appear unafraid. She had also learned that the room at the end of the wrong hallway was used exclusively by one person, that this person arrived before 6 and left after 9, that his name, according to the front desk, woman's very carefully managed expression whenever he appeared in the lobby, was someone the staff did not discuss, even among themselves, even in the break room, even when they thought no one was listening. She learned his name from a man on the rowing machine who wanted to feel knowledgeable. You wandered down that hallway yet? Joan looked up from her water bottle. Once. By accident. Lim Jae-sung. The man said it the way you say the name of a storm system. Informational, with the understanding that information alone constitutes a warning. Owns the building. Owns half the block, actually. The other half he is in the process of acquiring, which around here means the current owners are in the process of reconsidering their attachment to it. He paused. Word is he owns a few other things too, but nobody asks about those. What kind of other things? Joan asked. The man on the rowing machine looked at her for a moment. Then he looked away. The kind, he said carefully, that make people like Mr. Ellis come to work every day and never once call in sick, not even when his mother died, because some absences are harder to explain than grief. Joan looked back toward the hallway. Korean mob, the man said more quietly now. That is what people say. The Lim organization has been operating in Atlanta for 11 years. Nobody has successfully prosecuted anything. The people who have tried... He stopped rowing. Let's just say the cases went cold. Joan absorbed this. And he just runs a gym, among other things. The man started rowing again. The gym is legitimate, very legitimate. That is rather the point. He glanced at her once more. I would stay on the cardio side if I were you. That should have been more than enough. It was not. It was her 9th day at Apex when she saw him on the main floor. He was at the free weights in the far corner. Alone. The way he always seemed to be alone. Not because there was no one else present, but because whatever space he occupied reorganized itself around him. Joan noticed it before she noticed him. The way two regulars adjusted their trajectory without apparent reason, the unconscious decision to be elsewhere, the subtle repositioning of bodies that happened whenever he moved through a room, like weather, like physics, something that operated on people without their participation and without his effort. Where two of the suited men were positioned near the entrance to the weight room, not lifting, not pretending to lift, just present, in the specific way that men are present when their job is to ensure that nothing becomes a problem. Joan had worked in insurance long enough to recognize the architecture of managed risk when she saw it. This was a man who had decided that certain things simply would not happen to him, and had arranged the world accordingly. He noticed her at the same moment she noticed him. He didn't nod, didn't wave, just that same direct look, recognizing without greeting, seeing without performing the act of seeing, like her presence had been registered and filed and a decision about it was pending. Joan turned back to her machine. 3 minutes later, he was on the machine next to hers. Not because it was the only one available. There were 4 others open. The suited men near the door shifted their position without being told. "You came back," he said. "It is a gym. People come back." "Not to this one. Turnover rate is high." He adjusted his settings without looking at the screen, with the ease of someone who does not need external confirmation of what his hands already know. "You have been here 9 days. She turned to look at him. "You have been counting. I notice patterns. It is a professional habit." "What profession?" The corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile. The suggestion of one. The outline of where a smile would be if he allowed it. "Acquisitions," he said. Joan decided not to ask what he acquired. She had already heard enough to have some ideas, and she had learned early in life that there were categories of information that, once you had them, changed what you were responsible for knowing. They worked in silence for 4 minutes. Joan was acutely aware that her breathing was more audible than his. She was also aware that he had not looked at her the way the front desk woman looked at her, had not done that sliding comparative thing that men thought women didn't notice. He looked straight ahead. She was beside him. That was the entirety of the situation, apparently. It was so unremarkable that it was remarkable. "You are not here for yourself," he said. Not a question. Joan's hand tightened on the handle. "I beg your pardon?" "People who are here for themselves move differently, calmer. You look like you are running from something, or towards something you do not actually want." He said it the way you state a fact you have no particular investment in, cleanly, without softening or sharpening it. Either way, the urgency is wrong for the goal. The bluntness of it knocked the air out of her chest, not unkindly, just honestly in the way of someone who had long ago decided that imprecision was a form of disrespect. "That is a significant number of conclusions to draw from 9 days, she said. "It is," he agreed, and said nothing further. The conversation ended with the ease of something that had come to its natural conclusion, and Joan stared at the screen in front of her, and the only thing she could think was, he is not wrong. Curtis came to pick her up on Saturday in the particular good mood that arrived when he had been with his friends, and they had said things that made him feel certain about his choices. Joan had learned to recognize this version of him, louder, more generous with observations about other people, faster to compare. They went to dinner, Midtown, a place he had chosen. Halfway through the meal, his phone lit up on the table, and he turned it face down with the speed and precision of someone who had been practicing the motion. Joan saw the name before the screen went dark. Brittany. She set her fork down. "How is Damon doing?" "Good. Good, yeah. He and Britt are really great. She ran her first 10K last weekend." He picked up his fork. "You should think about signing up for something like that. A goal. Something to work toward." Joan looked at him across the table, at the face she had woken up next to for 3 years, the face that had once told her she was the most interesting woman in any room. That had held her hand at her father's funeral and not let go for 4 hours. The face that had learned, somewhere in the last several months, to look at her and see a renovation project. "Curtis," she said, "is there something you want to tell me?" He looked up, and the half-second before he composed himself, that tiny, unconsidered window, was the answer. "What do you mean?" "I mean, is there something that you want to tell me?" "Joan." He exhaled the way people do when they are about to say something they have been rehearsing. "I have just been thinking about us, about where we are going, and I think I need you to want this, the changes. Not just do them because I asked. I need you to want to be better." Joan was quiet for a long moment. "Better," she repeated. "For yourself. for us. She picked up her fork and finished her food and said very little for the rest of the meal. She paid for her half of the bill when it came, because she was not going to owe Curtis Daniels anything. Not tonight. He dropped her off, kissed her at the door, said he would call tomorrow. She went inside, sat on her couch in the dark, and thought about the motion of his hand turning that phone over. Practiced, automatic. The motion of someone who had been making that motion for long enough that it had stopped feeling like a decision. She called her best friend Adana at 11. Adana answered on the second ring. "Talk to me." "He is cheating on me," Joan said. Just like that. Plain. Because saying it plainly was the only way she would believe it herself. A beat. Then, "You know this, or you feel this?" "I feel it the way you feel rain when the sky has already gone dark and the air smells like it and the temperature drops 2 degrees before a single drop falls." "Okay?" Adana's voice was steady in the way of someone managing their own reaction for the sake of yours. "What are you going to do?" Joan looked at the gym bag by the door, the bag Curtis had bought, the bag she had been carrying into a building she hadn't chosen, on a schedule she hadn't set, toward a version of herself someone else had decided she needed to become. "I am going to keep going to the gym," she said. "Joan, not for him." She reached over and turned on the lamp. The room settled back into familiarity around her. "I think I just need to be somewhere. I will figure the rest out after I have been somewhere long enough to think." She hung up and sat in the lamplight and made herself a promise in the private language of promises you make before you have the full vocabulary for them. The following Tuesday, she arrived at Apex at 7 and found Lim Jae-sung standing at the front desk having what appeared to be a very quiet conversation with the manager that the manager was not finding quiet at all. Mr. Ellis was holding a clipboard. His knuckles were white around it. Whatever Jae-sung was saying, he was saying it without raising his voice, without moving his hands, without doing anything that could be described as threatening by anyone who hadn't been in that room. And yet, Now Ellis looked the way a man looks when he is being told something by someone he cannot argue with, cannot appeal to, and cannot leave. Joan signed in and headed for the floor. "Ms. Ibarra." She turned. He was looking at her from across the lobby. She had not told him her last name. The sign-in sheet had it. She filed this away. The fact that he had looked, the fact that he had remembered, the fact that he was now using it across a lobby full of people as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "There is a technique class at 8, Strength Fundamentals. You would benefit from it." "I have a routine." "You have a performance," he said. "There is a difference. You are not teaching it." God, no. And there it was. Dry, unexpected, completely unannounced. Something that was clearly humor. The real kind. From someone who found something genuinely funny and did not perform the finding of it. "I do not have the patience for group instruction. Kim is good. He was better than me at 22 and has spent 8 years improving since then, which I will never tell him because his ego requires no assistance." She went to the class. Kim was, as advertised, good. For the first time since she started coming to Apex, Joan's body did something she had not anticipated. It surprised her. Not in the way Curtis meant when he talked about transformation. Something smaller and more real. A weight she picked up that she had not thought she could pick up. A stance that clicked into alignment and held without effort. Her body doing exactly what she asked it to do, correctly and completely, as though it had been waiting for her to ask properly. When she stood in the studio afterward, breathing hard, and felt something that was not pride exactly, and not relief exactly, but something in the territory of both. Recognition. The specific recognition of, oh, you were always capable of this. Not a discovery of something new. A reintroduction to something that had been there the whole time, waiting for her to come back to it. She was in the Apex parking lot on a Wednesday morning, still in her car with the engine running, when the screenshot appeared in a group chat from a colleague who had seen it and known, immediately, that Joan needed to see it too. Damon's Instagram. A thread from his comments. Curtis's vocabulary, Curtis's rhythm, unmistakable in the way that people are always recognizable in the things they say when they think they are not being heard. She couldn't take a hint. And I tried the nice approach. She just kept being her, like that was a defense. Joan sat in the parking lot and read every word. Then she read them again. Not because she hadn't understood them the first time, but because she was giving herself the full weight of what they meant, what he had been saying, to whom, for how long, while she was going to the gym, on the schedule he had written on a post-it note, trying to become someone he could keep. She got out of the car and went inside. She went straight to the free weights. She picked up something heavier than she had ever picked up in her life and was halfway through a rep when a voice behind her said, without urgency, without alarm, and with the particular calm of someone who assessed situations and responded to what was actually there rather than what they expected, your form is going to cost you your shoulder. She turned. Jae-sung was a few feet away, arms crossed, watching her with attention that was not critical and not sympathetic, just present, fully present. The suited men who had been near the entrance had taken several quiet steps back. I am fine, she said. You are angry, he said, and you are about to lift angry, which is different from lifting motivated and much closer to lifting injured. Anger makes you pull instead of press. You will tear something. He walked forward and stood beside her, not in front of her, not positioning himself as the correction, just beside her, the way a person stands when they are offering assistance rather than instruction. And he adjusted her grip with 2 fingers, shifted her stance by an inch, a quarter turn of the shoulder. There, he said. Joan pressed the weight up. It moved cleanly, completely, without resistance. She did 3 more reps and then set it down and sat on the bench and put both hands over her face. Not crying. The tears would come later, in her car, on schedule, measured and finite. Just covering. Just needing 30 seconds where no one could see her expression while she sorted through what she was carrying. She heard him sit down on the bench across from her. The silence he gave her was different from any silence she had been given recently. It had no verdict in it. It was not waiting for her to perform recovery or provide explanation or make the moment comfortable for him. It was just silence, spacious and without agenda, as the kind that costs something to give. After a while, he said simply, "You do not have to tell me." "He is cheating on me," she said into her hands, "with someone who looks nothing like me. And he has been saying things about me to other people. While he was still with me. While I was going to a gym he picked out so I could look different enough to be worth keeping." She took her hands down, looked at the wall in front of her. "I have been trying to shrink myself for a man who was already gone." Jae-sung said nothing. She looked at him. He was watching her, not with discomfort, not reaching for something consoling to offer, not treating her feelings as a problem that required immediate resolution, just watching with the same quality of attention he gave everything, complete and without condition. "I already knew," she said. I think I knew before this morning. I just needed the evidence to stop arguing with myself." "Then this morning is not the loss," he said. "This morning is just confirmation of a loss that already happened." Joan blinked. "That is either extremely cold or extremely wise." "Probably both." He leaned forward, forearms on his knees. "Did you want him back? Before this morning?" She thought about the post-it note, the bag, the dinners where she had felt herself recalibrating to take up less space in the conversation, the way he had stopped looking at her like she was the most interesting woman in the room and started looking at her like she was a room that needed renovating. I wanted the version of him I had before he decided I was a problem to solve. "That version was also him," Jae-sung said. "People contain all their versions simultaneously. We simply prefer the chapters that flatter our choices." Joan looked at him. "What do you do when someone shows you who they are?" "I update my information," he said without hesitation, "and I act accordingly." She almost asked what that meant, coming from him. She almost asked what acting accordingly looked like when the person doing the acting ran an organization that made court cases go cold and turned property owners into willing sellers. She decided that some questions were better left unasked, not from fear, but from the understanding that some answers change the shape of what you are responsible for knowing. "You should finish your session," he said, standing. "Sitting with it will not move it." She got up. She finished her session. It was the best one she had had yet. And she did not call Curtis that evening. He called her 3 times. She let all 3 go to voicemail. In the morning, she listened to them with her coffee, giving each message the same neutral attention she gave insurance claims she had already decided on. The first, "Hey, just checking in. You up?" The second, "Joan, call me back when you get a chance." The third, "Look, I know things have been a little off between us. I want to fix that, but I need you to keep going to the gym, okay? For you. For both of us. For both of us." She deleted all 3 and went to Apex and did not check her phone for the rest of the morning. Saturday brunch at Joan's apartment. Sweet plantains in the pan. Adana at the counter with her chin in her hand, watching Joan cook with the careful attention of someone constructing a theory and waiting for confirmation. "Tell me about this gym." Joan kept her eyes on the pan. "It is a gym. You have been going every single day for nearly 3 weeks. You come home different. Not thinner, different. Like you found something in there, and there is a man." Joan turned off the burner. "What man?" "Joan Ibarra. I have known you since the 2nd grade. There is a man. He owns the gym. And nothing concrete. He says true things, in that way where you feel like you have been actually seen rather than appraised." Adana considered this carefully. "Is he dangerous?" Joan thought about the hallway, the heavy bag, the men in suits who repositioned themselves without being asked, the way Mr. Ellis held his clipboard like it was the one solid thing in a room that had suddenly become uncertain. The man on the rowing machine saying, "The cases went cold." So "Yes," she said, simply, without decoration. Adana went still. "Joan." "Not to me," she said, and she was surprised by how certain she was when she said it. Not performed certainty, the real kind, the kind that comes from paying attention. "I don't know how I know that, but I know it." Adana was quiet for a long moment, in the way of someone deciding whether to argue and concluding that the argument would not land. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay. What is it he sees when he looks at you?" Joan was quiet. "Me," she said. "Just me. Exactly as I am. Like there's nothing to wait for." Adana picked up a piece of plantain, chewed it. "After 3 years of Curtis, that must feel like a foreign language." "It feels like being human again," Joan said quietly. "Curtis does not deserve the amount of effort you have been putting into saving something he already broke without telling you he was breaking it," Adana said. "And whatever this man is, whatever that gym is, you went in there carrying someone else's weight, and you have been putting it down piece by piece every single day." She put her fork down. "That matters. Don't let anyone talk you out of what that means." Joan confronted Curtis on a Sunday. She drove to his apartment in Kirkwood with the windows down. She had not called ahead. She wanted the version of him that existed before he had time to prepare the version of himself he wanted her to see. He answered the door in sweats, surprised, trying to convert surprise into welcome before she noticed the surprise. She noticed Damon's comments. 3 weeks ago." She held up her phone with the screenshot. Not aggressively, just clearly the way you present evidence when the case is already decided and what you want is acknowledgement, not argument. "Tell me what is happening, Curtis." His face moved through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. "That is not... We were all just... Curtis." He stopped. "I know what you said about me. About why. About what I was not doing fast enough." She kept her voice even, not because she was not angry, but because the anger had moved past heat into something cooler and more structural, the kind of anger that does not need volume because it has already decided everything. I was going to a gym that costs more than my cable bill, on a schedule that was not mine, for reasons that were not mine, and you were telling Damon I couldn't take a hint. While you were still calling me, while you were still asking me to come over. Joan, it is complicated. Is it because of how I look? She said it without upward inflection, not a question she needed answered, a conclusion she was filing for the record. Tell me plainly, Curtis, is it because I do not look like Brittany? The pause before his answer lasted 4 seconds. She counted them. I just think. He stopped, started again. I think maybe we have different ideas about where we want to be, as people, physically. Say it plainly. I need someone who, he exhaled, someone who takes care of themselves the way I need them to. The way Brittany does. Silence. You have been with her since before you bought me that bag. Not accusation. Conclusion. Before the post-it note. Before the comments. Yes, you were already with her when you were still coming over and telling me you missed me. He did not say yes. He did not say no. His silence was the grammar of someone who has been caught and is now managing consequences. She had expected this to break her. She had braced for the collapse, the specific shame of being told by someone you loved that you were not the right shape for them, that 3 years of yourself were insufficient weight against the body you had brought them in. But standing in his doorway, what she felt was not collapse. It was release, like a pressure valve opening, like a thing she had been holding underwater had finally surfaced and she could let it go. And underneath the release, anger. The real kind. Or the kind that lives in the spine and the hands and does not need an audience and does not require him to understand it. I am done, she said. Joan, listen. I am done, Curtis. Same tone, same volume. The way you say something that does not require defense because it is simply true. Take care of yourself. She walked down the hallway and did not look back. She made it to the elevator before her hands started shaking. She made it to her car before the tears came. She timed it. 11 minutes. Then she drove to Adana's and ate an entire bowl of agusi soup and slept on Adana's couch and felt, in the morning, like someone who had returned from a long trip to a country that had been slowly draining her. She felt like herself. She almost did not go back to Apex. For 2 days she stayed away, not because of Jae Sung, because she had been going there for reasons that no longer existed, and she was not yet sure what it meant to go for reasons that belonged entirely to her. She had spent so long doing things as a response to other people's requirements that doing something simply because she wanted to felt like a language she was only half fluent in. She went back on Tuesday. Same time. The same automatic door. The front desk woman's tight practice smile. The smell of rubber and recycled air that she had come to find, despite herself, reassuring. The men in suits near the wall, different faces, same posture, same wordless communication of a kind of order that operated beneath the surface of things. Jae Sung was on the main floor. He looked up when she walked in. Something shifted in his expression. Small, contained. Or the kind of shift you only catch if you have been paying attention, and she had been paying attention. It was the shift of someone who had been noting an absence and was now noting the end of it, and who had not, in the intervening days, been entirely indifferent to that absence. You were gone, he said. 2 days. I noticed. 2 words. Entirely simple. And yet Joan understood, with the part of herself that had gotten very good at reading what people chose not to say, that those 2 words had cost him something to say, that a man who maintained this level of control over everything in his environment, over rooms and postures and the temperature of conversations, did not admit to noticing someone's absence without making a decision about it first. I ended it, she said. Duh, good. You do not know what happened. No. He held her gaze. But I have been watching you carry that weight since the first week. Whatever you walked away from needed to be walked away from. Joan felt something unknot in her chest, slowly, like something that had been held tight for a very long time and had forgotten what it felt like to not be held. I came here for the worst reason a person can have for going somewhere, she said, and somehow, in the middle of it, she stopped. I do not quite know what to do with that. He considered her for a moment. Have you eaten this morning? She blinked. What? It is noon. You did not eat before driving here. The protein bar in your bag does not qualify. He said it with complete neutrality, and as though this were a logistics problem and not a non sequitur that had just stepped in from another conversation entirely. There is a restaurant 2 blocks north. The owner knows me. The food is very good. Joan looked at him. You are asking me to lunch. I am stating facts and suggesting lunch. Yes. She thought about all the times she had said yes reflexively, and all the times she should have said no. She thought about the difference between an open door and the right door. She thought about a man who counted the days she had been present and admitted, without fanfare, that he had noticed when she was gone. I need to shower first, she said. I will wait. Simple. Like waiting was not a transaction. The restaurant was small and warm, and she understood the moment she walked in exactly what kind of place it was. No, not the food. The food was excellent. The sundubu jjigae arriving in a stone bowl still bubbling, the banchan spread without being asked. It was the way Mrs. Park, who owned the place and had clearly been expecting them, moved around Jae Sung with a particular kind of ease. Not deference, exactly. Not the deference of Mr. Ellis at the gym, that white-knuckled performance of calm. Something older. Like a woman who had known him long enough to have formed her own conclusions and had decided, after careful consideration, that he was someone she chose to trust. The distinction mattered, Joan thought. Fear looked a certain way. Trust looked different. Mrs. Park was not afraid of Lim Jae-sung. They sat in the booth by the window. Joan ordered without second-guessing herself. Without running the order through the filter she had developed over 3 years of eating with Curtis, and wondering how the quantity or content of her meal was landing. She ordered what she wanted. It felt like an act of rebellion so small it was almost embarrassing, and yet it mattered. The size of it mattered. Jae-sung noticed. He didn't say anything about it, but he noticed. They talked. Not about Curtis, not about whatever it was he did with the parts of his life that made Mr. Ellis grip clipboards and cases go cold. They talked about Atlanta with the opinionated familiarity of 2 people who had lived in it long enough to have complicated feelings about it. He asked about her work with the same directness he applied to everything. And she answered in full because there was nothing about the way he asked that suggested he was waiting for her to stop talking or filtering for the interesting parts. He told her he had come to Atlanta from Seoul 12 years ago. For better logistics, he said, in the way of someone who has told the short version so many times that it has become a closed door, he no longer bothers to dress up. She understood that this was as much as she would get right now, and she understood also that right now was not nothing. He did not look at the door when other women entered. He did not check his phone. He did not make a single comparison. Joan realized over her soup that she had forgotten what this was. Being in a conversation with someone who was entirely in the conversation, no exits being scouted, no performance being maintained, no part of their attention allocated to something or someone else. You are quiet, he said. I am taking inventory. Of what? Of what I have been accepting as normal. She looked at the window, at the street outside. The list is longer than I thought. He refilled her water glass. Most people's lists are, the ones who bother to look. Do you look? Constantly. He set the pitcher down. It is professionally necessary and personally exhausting. Joan laughed. Unexpected. Genuine. The kind of laugh that surprises you because it has not been calculated or offered as a social gesture. He watched her laugh. Not at the laugh, at her, like she had shown him something real, and he was filing it carefully in a place he intended to keep. What? She said. Nothing. That smile, fuller than she had ever seen it, actual and present. Nothing. He started appearing in unreasonable places. Her phone would light up with a contact she had saved as simply Apex, and the messages were brief and declarative and entirely in his register. There is a West African market on Auburn Avenue Saturday. The mango vendor is from Ghana. You would likely have opinions. She texted back. That is presumptuous. He replied. You spent 4 minutes last Thursday explaining why I was wrong about post-workout nutrition. It is not presumptuous. It is pattern recognition. She went to the market. He was already there, standing near the entrance with his hands in his pockets. No suits visible, though she had stopped assuming their absence meant they weren't present. He had, she was learning, a very particular relationship with visibility. Some things he wanted seen. Some things simply were, whether or not you were looking. They walked for 2 hours. She had, as predicted, strong opinions about the mango vendor, delivered at some volume with the specificity of someone who had grown up eating mangoes prepared correctly and was not prepared to be diplomatic about the alternatives. When she turned to share the latest conclusion, she found him already watching her, expression somewhere between amused and satisfied in a way that made her stop. You have a lot of feelings about mangoes, he said. I have a lot of feelings about things being done correctly. I know. And then, without preamble, without softening it into something more palatable, I appreciate that about you. Joan stopped walking. She realized with a clarity that felt almost physical what she was standing in the middle of. This was what it felt like. To be appreciated for the exact thing someone else had wanted, reduced. Her opinions, her certainty, her unwillingness to be quiet about things that she had decided mattered. The parts of herself she had spent 3 years managing down to a size that wouldn't inconvenience anyone. Curtis had called it exhausting, a lot, too much. Jae Sung had been building a list. What? He said, watching her face. Nothing. She picked up a mango. These are overpriced. I know, I bought 5. Why? The man drove 6 hours to sell them here. He said it simply, the way he said most things that contained more than they appeared to. That is worth the difference. Joan bought 3 and said nothing, and thought, this is a man who pays attention to the cost of things other people don't bother to see. The danger announced itself on a Thursday evening in the parking garage below Apex. Joan had stayed late after a strength session, talking to Kim about her progress, and by the time she got to the garage, it was 7:15 and the space was nearly empty. She had her keys out before she reached her car, habit from years of being a woman in parking garages, and she was 2 rows from her car when she heard the footsteps. 2 men, not gym members. She knew the gym members by now, their rhythms, their gear, their particular habits. These 2 were in dark clothes, and they moved with the directional intention of people who already knew where they were going, which was toward her. Joan stopped walking. She did not turn around. She calculated distance, angle, and the 3 seconds between her and her car door. And then the lights on the far side of the garage flickered once, and 2 of Jae Sung's men materialized from the shadows near the stairwell. Not hurrying, not shouting, just stepping into the space between Joan and the men who'd been walking toward her. They stood there, said nothing, did not need to. The 2 men in dark clothes stopped, a beat of silence that had the texture of a decision being made. Then they turned and walked back the way they had come. Joan stood very still. Her heart was hitting the inside of her chest in a way that was informative rather than decorative. She got to her car. She sat in it. She breathed. Her phone buzzed. Take the lower exit tonight. The upper ramp camera has been malfunctioning. I had it fixed this morning, but confirm you are out of the building. She stared at the message, then typed, I am in my car. On his reply, I know. Drive safe. She sat with that for a long moment, with what it meant, that he had known she was still in the building, that someone had been watching, not her, but the space around her, the way you watch the perimeter around something you have decided to protect without being asked to protect it. She called Adana from the driveway of her apartment. Something happened tonight, she said. Adana listened. All of it. The footsteps, the men, the materialization from the shadows, the message that told her he had already known. A long silence. Joan, Adana said carefully, I know. He is. I know what he is, Joan said, And I also know that tonight, in that garage, nothing happened to me. She looked at her front door. I need you to let me hold both of those things at once. Adana was quiet for a long time. Okay, she said finally. Okay, baby, I am holding them with you. She asked him about it the next morning. She found him in the hallway she had originally turned into by accident. The door open, the heavy bag still, his hands wrapped, but not yet working. She stood in the doorway the way she had that first day, except this time she was not lost and he was not pretending not to know she was there. The parking garage, she said. He unwrapped one hand slowly. What about it? The men. Your men. They were already there. Yes. You had people watching the garage. I have people watching the building. He said it simply. It is my building. Those men were not there for the building. He looked at her steadily. No, he said. They were not. The admission sat in the air between them. Joan held it for a moment. Who were the other two? Or the ones in dark clothes? A message, he said, from someone who has been trying to communicate with me in ways I have not been responding to. They chose a poor medium. Something shifted in his expression. Not anger, which would have been legible, but something colder and more deliberate. The expression of someone who has received an unacceptable communication and is composing his response. It will not happen again. How can you be certain of that? He looked at her with that directness that cut straight through to the thing being asked. Because I will make it very clear, he said, that the person they approached is under my protection, and that clarity, in my experience, resolves most questions. Joan held his gaze. I did not ask to be under your protection. No, he agreed. You didn't. I acted on my own conclusions. And as I told you, I do. She thought about what that meant, about what it meant to be seen, not appraised, not assessed for potential adjustment, but seen, by someone whose attention carried actual weight in the actual world. It was not comfortable, exactly. It was something more honest than comfort. Are you going to tell me to stop coming here? He asked. No, she said. Good. He began rewrapping his hand. Kim's class is in 20 minutes. She went to Kim's class. Joan's company had a quarterly client event the following Friday. Downtown Atlanta, rooftop venue. Curtis ran a consulting firm that shared her client roster. He would be there. He was always there. Wear the green dress, Adana said over the phone. I don't wear the green dress. You own the green dress, which means somewhere in you, you bought it planning to wear it. Joan looked at the dress hanging in the back of her closet. Deep emerald silk, wide straps cut to hold rather than hide. She had bought it 8 months ago and left the tags on. She had looked at it periodically, in the way that you look at something you bought as a promise to yourself and have not yet decided to keep. Fine, she said. The green dress. She texted Jae Sung that afternoon. She told him about the event. Work function, rooftop, midtown. Curtis would be there. She added that last detail not because it was relevant to an invitation, but because she was done curating information for the comfort of other people, and because she had decided that if he was going to be in her life, in whatever way he was going to be in her life, he deserved the full picture. His reply came in under a minute. Send me the address. No questions, no conditions, no assessment of the situation, no inventory of what she was asking, no negotiation of terms. Just send me the address. She sent it. The rooftop was exactly what Atlanta events are. Understated wealth performing as casual elegance, the skyline doing the decorating, servers moving with practiced invisibility. Joan arrived in the green dress. She had worn it in her apartment first, standing in front of the mirror for a long time, waiting to see whether it felt like something she had to survive or something she simply was. It felt like the latter. The silk moved with her, not against her. Her shoulders were back without effort. She had looked at herself and thought, oh, there you are. There you have been this whole time. She got a drink. She talked to colleagues. And she did not scan the room for Curtis. She felt him register her before she looked. A specific sensation, the awareness of someone recalibrating what they were seeing. When she finally looked, he was standing with Damon about 40 feet away, and the expression on his face moved through surprise and something that was probably regret, presenting as desire, and underneath both of those, something that looked a great deal like the beginning of panic. She held his gaze for 2 seconds. Then she turned back to her conversation. She was mid-sentence when the room changed. She felt it before she saw it. That atmospheric shift she had come to associate with one specific person. The same reorganization that happened in the weight room, in the lobby, in any space he entered. Conversations dropping a half tone, and trajectory adjustments happening without apparent cause. The room quietly, collectively deciding to be aware of something. She turned. Lim Jae-seung had arrived. Dark jacket. The kind of put-together that costs more than elaborate and requires less justification because it is not trying to prove anything. The tattoos covered. The presence not. You cannot cover a presence, you can only contain it. And this one was contained the way a river is contained. You are fully aware of the force behind the banks, even when the surface is still. 2 men she recognized from the gym were positioned near the rooftop entrance, facing outward. Not drinking, not mingling, just present in the way that meant the perimeter of this rooftop had been considered and arranged before anyone arrived. He found her immediately, without searching, across to her with the unhurried directness he used for everything. He looked at her, fully, clearly, the way he always looked at her. "Green," he said. "You noticed." "I notice most things. You look right." Not beautiful, though she would have accepted beautiful. Right. Like she had finally resolved into the shape she was always supposed to be. She heard Damon's voice somewhere to her left, lower now, uncertain in a way Damon rarely was. Who is that with Joan? She did not turn around. She did hear Curtis's voice, lower still, with the specific quality of a man realizing that the room he has just walked into is a different room than the one he thought he was walking into. "I don't know, but I know the men by the door." "What about them?" A silence. "Nothing," Curtis said. "Nothing. Let's get another drink." Curtis found her at the bar 20 minutes later. He had been working up to it. She had clocked his approach. The slow gravitational movement through the crowd, the recalibration, the way he kept glancing at Jae-sung and then away, at Jae-sung and then away, like a man doing arithmetic on a problem he did not like the answer to. He arrived with his glass and the particular warmth he deployed when he needed something. "Joan, you look, wow, you really look incredible." "Thank you. I had no idea you'd be—" "I work here, Curtis. I have worked here for 4 years." "Right, yeah, of course." He laughed slightly. "Listen, I have been thinking about everything, about what you said at my place. I was not handling things right. I genuinely was not trying to. I read the whole thread. Every word." She held her drink and looked at him without cruelty, without performance, with a steadiness she had found somewhere in the past 6 weeks and intended to keep for the rest of her life. "You wanted me to be smaller. You have wanted that for a long time. And when I did not get there on your schedule, you said things to other people that you would never have had the courage to say directly to me." "Joan, those were private. They were about me." She tilted her head slightly. "I want you to understand something, Curtis. Whatever you were trying to do to me, it did not work. I am still here. More here than I was when you met me. More here than I have been in 3 years." She paused, long enough for it to settle. "That is what I wanted you to see." Curtis opened his mouth. A presence settled at Joan's left shoulder, and not touching her, not stepping in front of her, not announcing itself in any way other than simply being there, the way structural things are there, walls, foundations, the things that hold shape without declaration, that do not need to be loud because they are not going anywhere. Curtis looked up. Lim Jae-sung looked at Curtis Daniels with the same directness he applied to everything, clear, unhurried, without heat. It was not a threatening look. It was something more precise than threatening. It was the look of a man who has already completed his assessment, has already decided everything he needs to decide, and is simply allowing the other person to understand that the assessment has been completed. It lasted approximately 4 seconds. Then he looked at Joan, and the question in his eyes was the same one he always asked: "Do you need anything, or are you finished?" Joan looked back at Curtis, at the man who had bought her a gym bag with a post-it note and called it love, at the man who had sent a message to his friend and called her inability to disappear a failure of comprehension. "Have a good evening," she said pleasantly. She turned away. She did not watch him leave, but she heard Damon, somewhere behind her, very quietly, "Curtis, we should go." And Curtis, quieter still, Yeah, we should go." She learned what happened to Curtis's business from 3 separate sources over the following 2 weeks, which was how she knew the picture was complete. The property development project he had anchored his consulting practice to, 2 years of referrals, reputation, with the careful construction of a professional identity, came apart. The lead investor withdrew, quietly, thoroughly. The kind of withdrawal that doesn't generate news but generates consequences, the slow kind that move through professional networks like water through stone, invisibly, completely, and without mercy. Then the other clients began to drift, not all at once. One, then another, then a third, who said something vague about restructuring, about taking things in a different direction, about timing. The language of professional distance that people use when they have received information they are not going to share with you. And Damon, it turned out, was not the friend Curtis had believed him to be. When the business began to unravel, Damon repositioned himself quickly and completely, with the ease of someone who had always maintained a secondary position and was now making it primary. Curtis was left holding a situation that no longer had the people around it who had made it feel stable. Joan did not ask Jae Sung about any of it. One afternoon in the booth by the window at Mrs. Park's restaurant, over sundubu jjigae and the kind of comfortable silence that takes weeks to build between 2 people, she set down her spoon and said, "Did you make calls?" He set his chopsticks down with unhurried precision. "I make calls every day. It is part of my work." Jae Sung. He looked at her, and what she saw on his face was the most unguarded thing she had seen from him. Direct, deliberate, entirely intentional. He was not hiding this. He was deciding how to tell the truth, which was different from deciding whether to tell it. "I updated my information," he said, "and I acted accordingly." She let that sit for a moment. "You did not have to." "I know. I did not ask you to." "I know that also." He looked at her steadily. "I do not act on behalf of people's requests. I act on my own conclusions. My conclusion was that certain things should not be allowed to continue to cause harm simply because their mechanisms are invisible, that the person doing the harm had been doing it in ways designed to look like concern, and that this kind of harm is, in my experience, the most corrosive kind, the kind that makes the person being harmed question their own perception." He picked up his chopsticks again. "I have a particular dislike of that kind of harm." Joan was quiet for a long moment. "What you did," she said carefully, "the calls, the investors, all of it." "Yes, that is not a small thing." "No," he agreed, "it is not. And you did it because I am precise," he said, "about what I will allow to exist in proximity to things I care about." He held her gaze. "That is the full answer." Joan looked at him, at the man who had counted her days and admitted he had noticed her absence, who had stationed people in a parking garage without being asked, who ran an organization that moved through Atlanta like weather, invisible, complete, without mercy for things that needed to be removed, and who had, with that same precision, turned its attention toward the quiet, corrosive damage one ordinary man had been doing to one woman who had been carrying it alone. "You are going to be a very complicated person to know," she said. "Almost certainly," he said without apology. I'm already complicated. Yes. He looked up. That full smile, the real one, the one she had been collecting pieces of for weeks and was now seeing whole. I have a list. She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. He looked down at their hands for a moment. Then he turned his over and held hers, simply, without ceremony, without making it a moment that required anything other than what it was. Outside the window, Atlanta moved through its late afternoon, loud, indifferent, beautiful in the specific way of cities that do not stop for anything. Joan Ibarra sat in a booth by the window and felt the full, unedited weight of herself, not as a problem, not as a condition requiring management, not as something that needed to be smaller to be worthy of taking up space in someone else's life, as the whole of it, or as exactly enough, as in fact, everything. Curtis had wanted her to disappear by degrees, to reduce herself until what was left was something he could hold without effort, something that did not take up too much space in his carefully managed life. And instead, she had walked into a gym she never chose and found a man who kept a list of her opinions, her certainty, her willingness to be loud about things that mattered, and had called that list the reason. She had gone there to save a relationship. She had saved something much more important. If Joan's story moved you, if you felt even one moment of her in yourself, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss a story. I make these for you, every single one. Comment part 2 if you would like to see the other part of Joan's story with Jae Sung. I will see you soon.